Welcome back, everyone, to the Vibrant Flow Podcast. Today, we have a special guest and also my mentor, Alex Pursglove. And I'm so excited to dive into ecstasy and pleasure and fulfillment in our lives as women. And she, as an entrepreneur, has been an inspiration and has also pushed me towards my dreams, and that has been such a gift in my life. So I am so excited to offer you this conversation with Alex. She is really inspirational as a woman of faith, and I know you're going to love this conversation. You're going to be inspired by it.
Thank you, Johanna. I really appreciate that warm introduction. And like I just said to you before we started recording, I'm really happy to be here too. I've always loved your energy, your heart to want to help other women live with more pleasure and joy and fulfillment and to really have deeper intimacy in their relationships and to live a more lit up life. And that's exactly what I love doing as well. So I am very excited for our juicy conversation today.
Yes, absolutely. And just a bit about Alex before we dive into our topics today. I'm just going to read through your bio because it's just incredible. It just puts it all together, right? So, from embracing personal growth and shifting limiting beliefs, Alex Pursglove transformed from a people-pleasing, self-criticizing, and struggling solopreneur into an unapologetic woman running a thriving coaching business. Once she learned how to release shame and become more fully expressed, she 10x'd her business in under 2 years while strengthening her faith, marriage, and personal fulfillment. Alex is dedicated to helping other women create fulfillment by unlocking their creative power and cultivating conviction in their value. And Alex and her husband, Adam, value traveling, practicing Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and building a purpose-filled life together with their beautiful daughter, Stella Love. That's just, there are so many things already there. I've been talking about people pleasing and self-criticism and shame and all of these things. I know my audience, many of them deeply have been struggling with these things, especially people pleasing, especially being incredibly self-critical to the point of my journey of having chronic pain constantly present in your body and just not being able to move forward with pleasure and fulfillment. So, Alex, I'm really curious to hear, where did this journey start? Where do we begin in terms of your transformation?
I appreciate that. And I've just felt the heaviness, as you said. A lot of members of your audience, can relate to this and struggle with this. And I get it. It was such a struggle for me for a long time. And I think the best place to start would be in my early 20s when I was working in the film industry, actually at the time. I had always dreamed of going into film, but once I actually was working in the industry, I was feeling very misaligned with the culture. I was really struggling to make connections with other people out in LA. I was experiencing some inappropriateness of the, and some misogyny in that culture. And then I also, at the time, had gotten into a very toxic relationship, a narcissistically abusive relationship. And I'd been in that relationship for almost 2 years, and I was feeling just miserable in my day-to-day work. And then out of the blue, I was diagnosed with a tumor in my pancreas with cancerous tissue, is how it was explained to me, what I was told. And obviously at 24, that came as quite a shock to me, even though I'd been having terrible digestive issues and I'd lost 20 pounds without trying. I was constantly tired, just hadn't been feeling good. And I look back now, and my personal belief is that it actually was suppressing so much emotion, suppressing anger, suppressing sadness that was leading to depression. It was leading to pain in my body. It was leading to all of these issues because I was stuffing what I really wanted. I was not standing up for myself. I was people pleasing. I was mask wearing. And when you do that, when you keep yourself so stifled and depressed, it's like you keep all of this negative energy and tension in your body, and it takes a toll on you physically. And I'd been doing that for so many years. And so by the time I was diagnosed with this tumor, it hit me just so strongly that I needed to make changes in my life. I knew this is not how I wanted to be living my life. I wanted so much more enjoyment and passion and love and significance in my life. And I actually remember the very first thought I had when the nurse told me on the phone what it was. My very first thought was, but I need to know how to connect more deeply to God. I haven't actually really experienced being deeply connected to God and connected to love. And those were the two things that mattered to me. It was like my spirituality and love. And I knew I just wanted more love in my life. And so it completely just rocked me. And I committed in that moment to start this quest, if you will, or start on this new path to finding out how to live with more significance and joy and purpose. And so fortunately, the tumor, it turned out to be an incredibly rare, non-aggressive kind of tumor. It wasn't the typical pancreatic cancer you hear about. So I was cured by surgery at the National Institute of Health. And I'm so grateful for that. But it was definitely a long recovery and a hard recovery process. And so over the next couple of months, I recovered, and then I eventually got the strength to leave my relationship, to move back home to Pittsburgh, which is where I was from. And I started over and started my journey into discovering, how do I really live in alignment with who I really am and live with joy and fulfillment.
That point, that sort of breaking point when your your body is giving you all of the signals to stop, to reevaluate, to recalibrate everything, it can be a scary place to be in.
Mm-hmm.
And we both know this from experience, and I know that some of my ladies also have been going through that or are currently going through that. That they've been given some news or about their health, or they see that something is definitely not working and something needs to change. And that is a motivation for sure when you just you get that, you get that sort of like yell from the sky, like you have to change. But
Yes, you get the wake up call.
yes, the wake up call for sure. um when we want to move, I don't want to say try, when we decide to move forward from that place, in your experience, what were the next steps? Because sometimes there's a lot of confusion. There's like, okay, I'm gonna try things. What is it that I need to do or change or shift in my beliefs if I want to live with more fulfillment and faith and with more connection to God? Where do we begin?
Mm, that is a fantastic question. And it's not a one size fits all black and white answer, as you know, right? Everyone has their journey and their unique experiences. And it's okay for it to be a journey. It's okay for it to be a process. So I think the awareness is the very first piece and the most, or well, maybe not the most important, but it's the first step, right? It's the first significant step of going into that awareness and deciding I want something different. And that is what was so huge for me, was making that firm decision. When I got the diagnosis, I said, I'm going to do things differently. I am not going to forget about this in a couple months. Like, I'm going to change my life from this. And I kind of think of this, Johanna, as almost having an experience of a phoenix, burning and then rising from the ashes. That's happened for me a few times in my life. And this was the first significant phoenix rising moment for me, was following through on that decision to move home and to leave my relationship, to leave film, and to really pursue the next steps, or at least as much as I knew at that point, about what was in greater alignment with me. So the first place that I'll recommend for clients, if we're exploring, or to other women I know, if we're exploring how they can start living with more joy and fulfillment when they have this awareness that things are out of alignment, is to first start exploring, what are the true desires? Where is your heart calling you? and tapping into your heart over your head, because your head most often is going to be connected to fear or doubt spirals and second guessing and questioning. And of course, I had all that come up. I mean, even after I recovered from my surgery, it still took me a few months to leave my relationship to move back home because I had all these doubt spirals popping up. But wait a minute, you've invested 2 years into film. You're going to have to start all over. You know, all those but what ifs that can come up. So I've learned over the years and doing a lot of work on myself and learning how to really live from your highest self and from your inner guidance over fear is that you first have to make the space to really let your heart lead, to tap into those true desires and say, what is it that is actually really calling me forward? And what is most important to me? If I put aside the fears of getting it wrong or the shoulds, you know, of what other people tell me I should do, and worrying about what if I screw it up or what if it doesn't work out the way I want, if you just put a pin in those fears and let yourself explore, what is it that's actually pulling me forward? What does light me up? What is exciting me? And then you have to meet that awareness with action. So awareness, like I said, is a powerful, great first step. And to actually start shifting it, you then have to take aligned action that's moving you towards your desires.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Mm. You mentioned fears, you mentioned doubt spirals and all of that. You know, our ego is sometimes very vocal about
Mm-hmm.
what it thinks is best. And obviously, it is trying to keep us safe. And we get that. And yet, sometimes it feels really hard to move forward when those fear spirals are literally running the show.
Mm-hmm.
So what is your take, your insight into how to deal with fear? I know you have a lot to say about this.
Yes, I could go on about this for a while, but I'll try to keep it a little more succinct for our conversation today. One of the greatest things I've learned about fear, and a lot of this I learned when I actually went full time with my business. So there was about a 7 year period when I moved home to Pittsburgh, and I actually worked a nonprofit for 7 years, and then got more and more clarity as I took steps forward and pursued a career that was more service based and more making an impact and helping people reach their potential and helping them rise. And so that's how I found the coaching industry and found that's really where my greatest alignment was. And so as I was moving into this and going full time in my business, which had a lot of areas of unknown for me because my background was in film and nonprofit. So
Mm.
as I was making this leap, I had to do a lot of work in looking at my fears and my subconscious and my limiting beliefs, because that was the greatest thing that was slowing me down and stopping me were these self-doubt spirals. And so one of the greatest things that I learned is that when you fight with your fear, when you reject your fear, when you beat yourself up for your fear, it keeps you stuck in the cycle. And I know that was something I was really good at. Why I say I was a self-criticizer is that I would have inspirations, I would have ideas, I'd want to take risks to pursue my business. And then fear would come up or doubt would come up, and then I'd get so mad at myself. And why are you letting this slow you down? And you shouldn't be feeling afraid, or you shouldn't be stressing over this person saying no. You should believe in abundance. You should, should, all those things. And when you do that, you're just making yourself wrong over and over again. And when you're making yourself wrong, you can't live in your greatest power. You can't find your voice. You can't move forward in your highest self when you're living in wrongness and self-judgment. So I believe the greatest way to start addressing your fear is first making friends with your fear and accepting all of yourself, accepting your humanity, accepting the inner child in you, which is where your subconscious is developed when you're a little child. So your subconscious mind fears, they live in the you that, is 8 or younger for the most part. And so just like you wouldn't fight with a little child or put them down or make them feel bad, right, for having fears or for crying or having emotion, that's the same way you need to treat yourself, is saying, oh, this fear is arising. Okay, it's okay to have fear. It's okay that this is coming up for you. It's okay. Of course, your subconscious mind is scared. You're stepping into unknown. This is like a little kid going into, a completely unknown area and not sure where the adult is and feeling afraid. That's okay. It's okay to just take your own hand and say, it's okay. You're allowed to have fear. You're allowed to be afraid. I see you. I hear you. And this fear is showing us something. This fear is showing us, or showing me, something that I can grow in. It's showing me opportunity for my next evolution. Something is trying to emerge from me. Something is trying to grow. Something is trying to be born from my highest self. And this fear is pointing a light on it. The things that we're afraid of, other than the kind of fear that's like keeping you safe, like you're walking down a dark alley and your hairs stand up on the back of your neck because you know it's dangerous, which is also fear to keep you safe. But outside of fears like that are purely for survival, these other fears that we have, it's shining a light on our growth path. Our darkness is always pointing to the opportunity for the light. So we always experience the greatest growth when we're willing to go into those fears and explore them, accept them, and then take action that combats the fear.
Right. So essentially, we're flipping the script in the sense that instead of beating the fear away and like trying to erase it and delete it because we should be confident all the time, rather we're actually seeing it as a tool and as something that serves you in pinpointing and seeing what it actually is that you want to go and pursue and what is stopping you and how you can grow.
Absolutely. And I'm glad as you reflected that back to me, it also brought up this second piece, which is not judging the fear, not beating yourself up, not fighting with it, and then also not believing it.
Mm.
So we always get to choose what we actually believe in, right? You don't have to believe everything that you think. So if you're considering something you want to do, like, for example, with me, like launching a new program in my business, and then the but what ifs come up and well, what if people don't sign up? What if you don't have enough leads for this? What if this isn't the right messaging? What if this won't actually help people? What if you don't make enough money? Whatever those but what ifs might be that come up, there's the piece of not judging myself for having those beliefs. So yeah, okay, you're having fear because you really care about this. And then there's also the piece of saying, oh yeah, I don't have to believe everything that I think. I don't have to go down the spiral and believe that this is going to be a disaster or focus on the worst case scenario. It's it's a much higher service to me to stop and look at, what is this fear showing me? What is this fear showing me? Okay, oh, maybe there are some things that I could do to increase the amount of leads that I have or the people I could help. Maybe I could look at refining this even more, making sure it's as aligned as it can possibly be. And then I also need to grow in my confidence, right? And this is an opportunity for me to grow in selling what I do even more passionately, putting myself out there more boldly. So it's always showing you opportunities for growth if you're willing to look at it that way, instead of just believing all of the negative things it's saying to you.
Mm. Yeah, exactly. And I remember you saying in one of your like lessons, it was in the program, about the level of self-soothing needing to be at the same level of the fear or something to that effect. That
Yes.
it needs to match the fear that you experience. So what does this look like in like, give me an example of matching your self-soothing to the level of the fear you are experiencing? Because so many of us, we just, yeah, we hear the word self-soothing and yeah, okay, you just, say a few words to yourself and a few affirmations and shake it out a little bit, and then you sort of tell yourself, and now I should be fine, and now I should just move on, right?
Yes. Yes. And I know a lot of women who struggle with this, and I did as well when I first started practicing meeting myself with kindness and soothing and compassion over judgment. It was a challenge because the thoughts that would come up in my mind were, I shouldn't have to do this, or this is silly, or okay, yeah, I get it, I'm fine. And so there was this real resistance to actually being very soothing to myself. But the way I like to think of it, and I'll encourage others to think of it this way as well, is imagine having a fight with your partner, and maybe you did something, that hurt your partner's feelings or that caused tension and sadness. And if you went to your partner and said to them, okay, yeah, I'm sorry, you're fine, that probably wouldn't actually make your partner feel like you really understood, like you saw them, like you got it. right? And then it's hard to move on from having tension or conflict if the other person doesn't feel seen or understood. And so it actually works the same way with yourself. When you're having a fight with yourself, when you're having fear, when you're having that tension and back and forth, if you just dismiss yourself pretty quickly, like, okay, yeah, you're fine. Just get over this. Just get over this. It's fine. You're not going to actually feel seen. And so the way to create a stronger relationship with yourself and more trust with yourself, more value with yourself, is to meet yourself with that same kind of compassion and soothing. So if it's something, you know, that's really small, like there's plenty of little, I'll say old tapes that come up for me, like times where it's just like, oh, what if this doesn't work? Oh, yeah, okay. I'm not really concerned about that. I don't need to spend a lot of time on that, right? We have a bunch of thoughts every day. And sometimes there's just old little tapes, old little fears that pop up that don't mean much. But when you're actually feeling afraid or you're experiencing regret or guilt or shame or any of those things that are experience or that are causing deeper emotional experiences, it's so important that you meet yourself with real tenderness and soothing and compassion so you can let the inner child in you be seen.
Yeah, exactly. So what would this look like? Like walking through the process, for example. Let's say I'm gonna give you an example. Uh let's say something has gone really wrong. I don't know. I've been fired at work and I feel an intense spike of shame of not like I wasn't enough. What did I do wrong? And also resentment, anger, and fear of what is going to happen moving forward. Where do I start? Like, do I start with just breathing? What would you do?
Mm-hmm. Well, let me ask you this. Or let's imagine, is there a child in your life that you care for that you can think of right now?
Well,
A niece, nephew, friend's child?
not a small child, but a teenager, yes.
Okay, let's go with a teenager. So imagine this teenager came to you and started telling you, you know, I was let go from my job, right? My side hustle. I was let go. I'm feeling really ashamed. I'm frustrated. I'm embarrassed. I don't know what to do. Don't know if I can tell my parents. How would you comfort that teenager?
I would try to help her feel into it and just be present with her body and know that it's going to be okay, that she has so much in front of her, that this job was just one chapter in her book and she's going to take a lot of lessons from this, and she's courageous, capable, smart, all of it. But yeah, I would also want to somehow show her how to process through that fear from her body and not just in her mind.
I'm so glad you brought that in. That is really powerful because the fear, we're feeling it throughout our body, right? It's the mental thoughts that's causing the fear, but we're having a physical reaction to it. So I ask you how you would respond to the teenager, and thank you for being open to that, of walking through that little mini exercise there. Because for any client I talk to or women I meet, I encourage exploring what feels aligned for you while also challenging yourself to get a little uncomfortable in, you know, exploring how you can soothe yourself. But there isn't a one size fits all answer, because it's about what you need, what you actually need to feel supported, and what would feel good for you. Now, I do believe, and I'm so glad, like I said, that you brought this in, it's a mind, mental and emotional and physical response. So for me personally, I always like to get my feet on the floor when I'm feeling fear and focus my attention on how the ground feels underneath me to get myself feeling grounded. Sometimes I'll pause and put my hands on my heart and do a couple deep breaths just to get myself present. So what's really important is getting present and actually remembering and feeling your body, being present where you are in this moment, acknowledging I'm safe. In this moment, right here, right now, I'm safe. I'm taken care of, I'm held, and then allowing yourself to go through your process of soothing yourself. And I loved how you were so encouraging and affirming, when you went through what you would say to the teenager. And it was a really beautiful illustration of what it looks like to have your own back. And that's essentially what you're doing, is you're saying, I've got you. I'm supporting you. I'm here. I see you. I hear you. I'm not dismissing you. And I've got you.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like this is so, so crucial because we bypass this process so
Mhm.
easily. Like you said, we need to be fine with it. Yeah, okay, I got it. Moving on. Right. And then we
Right.
bypass a crucial step in actually creating intimacy with ourselves. And I like to focus on the body a lot, from especially from a feminine perspective, how the feminine lives in the body. Um and we've been programmed to do the opposite, to bypass that whole process altogether, and then we wonder why we have so much accumulated emotions, anger, tension is storing in our hips and womb area. It's crazy. And we wonder why we have all these issues and symptoms. Then
Mhm.
this should be part of the basic curriculum at schools, but unfortunately, it probably isn't. I don't know how it is these days, but I've never heard this being taught. So
In
I'm
most
so
schools, not to my knowledge.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, not to my knowledge either. Right. So that I really hope that this inspires you, my dear listeners, to face yourself and comfort yourselves with compassion and give it the time and space that it actually requires, and not try to cram it in 1 minute and then move on to the next task with all of that stored survival stress in your body.
Mhm.
I would
Mhm.
like to move on to your relationship and fulfillment now as a mother, a wife, and also an entrepreneur. And how did you start building this? Obviously, it was not just you, but your husband as well, who has been supporting you along the way. How did you build this life of pleasure and fulfillment and doing what you love, and also finding the time and really living with your family, not just as it being something on the side, but really having that in the center of your focus as well?
Mm. There's so many things I could say about that, and I do. I have a really wonderful husband who has been so supportive, and that's something that was always very important to me, and something I didn't actually have before my husband. And that's why he was so different for me. And I think so right off the bat, I just fell very in love with my husband early on, because he was such a cheerleader for me
Mm.
in my dreams and very supportive. And my husband also has had his own journey of feeling fear from decisions I've made. And I've made some really big leaps by going full time in my business. When I decided to invest in working with high level mentors, that were a huge stretch for me financially, that were a stretch for my business. There were a lot of decisions that I made that we definitely had to look at together. And for me, I think what's helped us continue to deepen intimacy and have so much strength in our marriage, as we've been on quite a transformational journey, and like I said, a journey with a lot of risks over the last few years, was that as I was taking these leaps, this is also when I was simultaneously doing this really deep work and learning how to remove my fear, accept myself, and replace judgment with compassion, and to really trust myself more. And the more I was able to trust myself, it was easier for my husband to trust me and to be on board, because I also wasn't trying to convince or force him. And this was a huge learning curve for me. A couple years ago, I came to see that as a type A, high achieving, self criticizing woman, that also spilled over into me being controlling with my husband. And I
Mm.
didn't even realize it was controlling because it was very subtle ways, but wanting him to, show up in different ways, wanting him to have the same priorities that I had, wanting him to wear the kind of clothes that I thought he should wear, or wanting him to cut his hair the way I thought he should and the way I thought looked best. And so all these little places where I didn't even realize that I was bringing control into our relationship. And so when I started working on myself and learning how to remove that kind of controlling, self-criticizing, people-pleasing behavior within myself, then I also saw how that was showing up in my marriage. And so I started pulling back and really offering so much more acceptance and supporting my husband and having his autonomy and not trying to force again or control his reactions or how he felt about things. So I learned how to show up and bring real honesty. So not people please, but bring real honesty about what I wanted, how I was feeling, my dreams, what I wanted to do, and then making space for whatever his reaction was. And by doing that, it created this environment for us to be a lot more seen with each other. And again, anytime you're more seen, you deepen intimacy. When you're hiding, you put up walls. So for us, it's been this really amazing journey of learning how to be more seen with each other, to express more openly with each other so that each of us gets to be seen and loved and accepted for who we really are. And I can tell you today, this is, like I said, a small example, but one thing, I used to do was comment about my husband's haircuts or have opinions about how he dressed. And since COVID, my husband's let his hair grow long and it's super wild. He never gets it done or styled. And I absolutely love it now. If you told me 4 years ago that his hair would look like it did today, I probably would have judged it. And now today I'm like, I love his wild hair because he's being Adam. This is him. He's letting his hair grow long. He's being his wild masculine self. And he does not care what anyone thinks about his hair. He's doing it for him. And now I love that. I love that because I've removed any kind of wiring or conditioning I had of thinking that, oh, this is, what a good wife does. She helps her husband look well kept and clean and, have a haircut that people don't comment on. I let go of all of that and learned how to let Adam be Adam. And it's helped me fall in love with him even more.
Mm. Yeah, that is a huge point. And for sure, some of the biggest topics that I've talked about on this podcast, the tendency to control. And I've been very transparent with my journey as well, that every time that I have this discomfort with myself, or especially in the past when I had these moments where I really felt dissatisfied with myself, I was critical of myself, really not in, like, disconnected from my body and just in my head, locked up, analyzing, criticizing. And obviously, from that place, I would then project all of that onto my husband and be highly critical of him as well. And, as well as I do, that doesn't create harmony, that doesn't create chemistry, polarity in a
Mhm.
relationship. But it is so crucial that we remember that it begins with ourselves. It begins with facing and releasing that fear that is propelling the control. Because if we didn't have any fear at all, we would not have any need to control,
Mhm.
I think. And seeing where that comes from. What am I not accepting in myself? What am I not dealing with myself? What am I not embracing and loving in myself? And from that place, it's easier to create that beautiful intimacy with your husband, with your partner. So I love that you brought that up. It is a
Mhm.
huge point.
And what a great point you just made about control being based in fear. And it really is. And I think that's such a powerful question to ask yourself when you find yourself in control or when you're really attached to how your partner is going to react or respond or what they're doing, is to stop and ask yourself, what is this reflecting back to me? What is this showing me about me? I know for a fact that anytime we are in judgment of someone else, it's because there's something being reflected back to us within ourselves that we're afraid to look at.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
Ex-
we just wouldn't really care. right? We can have opinions about things, but it wouldn't bother us. We wouldn't sit there in judgment or control. So I love that you brought that in, Johanna. It's such a powerful circling back to fear always illuminating something for us and showing us something about our own growth and where we're looking to meet our own needs more fully.
Yeah, exactly. So before we wrap this conversation up, and I'm sure we could talk all day about these things, it's so good. I want to hear your take on how would you guide women into unlocking their creative power and their personal fulfillment?
What a great question, because we've already been laying the groundwork for it. Like I mentioned before, our creativity is really tapped into our desires. So starting with what's really coming up from your heart, what are your desires, what's pulling you forward, and then giving yourself permission to accept your desires. I know a lot of women, and myself included, who have had attachments to superwoman syndrome, feeling like you have to be everything to everyone or do everything, or that it's selfish to prioritize yourself, your desires, your needs. And yet I find that it's actually that's a myth, a lie, because when we are depleted, we can't be in highest service to anybody. And we can actually show up and serve most powerfully when our cup is full and when we're supported. So giving yourself that space to explore your desires, and then permission to prioritize and value yourself and your desires. I ask almost every client I work with this question. I pose this a lot in workshops I do because it really is such a powerful question, is to stop and ask yourself, if I were valuing myself and my desires as a top priority, what would I start doing differently? And when you let yourself explore it that way and say, what would be different? How could I make this work? How could I create more of my desires? What would it look like for me to be more supported and to have more space for myself and for what I want? Then you start opening the doors to that creativity. You can let yourself brainstorm and explore, hey, what are all the options here? And so bring in that curiosity and let yourself explore it versus that fear-based approach of trying to figure it all out and what could go wrong, and who could this be taking something away from, and all those feelings that just take you into negativity. If you're going into negativity, you're not in creativity. So use curiosity to redirect yourself back into what could go well, what could go right from this, what could possibly come from this? How could I serve people? What are all the options available to me? And let yourself explore it with a little bit of lightheartedness or playfulness, and again, curiosity, and see what unfolds.
Yeah, exactly. That's such a great note to end on. Oh my goodness. Like I said, we could go on and on. I have still like 25 questions to go through, but in respect to your time, we're going to wrap this up here. Is there anything that you would like to tell us about that you are currently working on? And also, please tell us where we can find you online.
Yes, thanks for asking. I love connecting with people on Instagram. I'm at Alex Pursglove, and the only Alex Pursglove, I think, on Instagram, so should be easy to find me. But I love connecting with people on Instagram. I'd love to hear anyone who listened to this, your takeaways, your insights, thoughts, questions. I love connecting with people, so feel free to reach out to me directly. And then I often am putting out virtual workshops or challenges or new opportunities to explore more of this content. I have a workshop coming up on May 10th and 11th. I'm not sure exactly when the podcast is posting, but a workshop coming up on igniting ecstasy in business for women entrepreneurs. And I host small group retreats for women entrepreneurs. So I just would love to have conversations with anyone who wants to explore this topic further. I also have a wealth of resources and people who are exploring, how to remove fear and live as your highest self and live with more passion and purpose. I'd be happy to chat with you and connect you to any aligned resources for you.
Awesome. That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Alex, for your time. I appreciate it. It's always a pleasure to connect with you.
Oh, same here, Johanna. Thanks so much for having me on. I loved this conversation.